Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about American Born Chinese, Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we got a little bit more context. I thought Michelle Yeoh's character, she's a goddess named Guan Yin. I looked into it. I was like, looking at it, I was like, is that how you pronounce it? That is like phonetically how you pronounce it. I should have trusted my gut on that. But Guan Yin is like a goddess of what I was reading, compassion and mercy. And so she does seem like she has kind of a playful nature to it. I think it's so interesting. I mean, I like it when gods aren't complete and other douchebags. Most mythology does not paint gods in the best of light. Most stories don't paint them in the best of light. So her being kind of cheeky and funny when she takes Wei Chen to the apartment. It's like, yeah, this is your apartment. Yay! I like that. But nevertheless, I thought she's the one that sent Wei Chen on his mission, but it's like, no, she knew he was here for a reason, and so that's why she showed up to interrupt things between him and his dad. But she was like, right, why are you on Earth? Why did you go to a high school? Because he went to find Jin, because Jin, he believes because of his dream, a crane told him that he needs to find a guide to the fourth school, and he believes Wei Chen believes that Jin's going to be the one to lead him to the scroll. And so it's like, right, it's about trying to become friends with him and trying to gain his trust, because it's like, right, he's more likely to follow a friend and trust you, unless, can't, probably won't, follow a monkey in that regard. Also, the whole, sticking, the staff and hiding it in your ear. It's like, I don't know what, she's like, I don't know what it is between you and your dad hiding stuff and sticking stuff in your ear. I don't get that. But it's like, the moment he hid the staff in the toy, I was like, that's going to be a problem later on, because I could easily see a situation happening in a show where, someone ends up taking that toy and the staff is lost in that regard. I don't know, especially, because he wants to leave it with Jin, because I guess it's like, right, you're my guide, and as long as it's not on me, my dad or anyone else trying to get it won't be able to get it off me, because they won't know where to look. They'll try looking through, because that might have been that guy Pixie or whatever, that might have been Wei Chen's locker that he was looking through. So it's like, right, I gotta hide it somewhere that they wouldn't look, so it's like, right, they don't really know about my connection to Jin. The only one who knows about his connection to Jin is Guan Yin. So because I figured that person was going to, I in my head, I thought the person, the person who ended up being Pigsy, I thought that was going to be his dad or something in disguise. But it's like, because his dad can transform, but it's like, it seems like they can't. It makes sense, because transforming is only a power his dad has. I don't think he's acquired it yet. The 72 transformations ability. Maybe he'll eventually get it later on. But I think it's interesting that he's able to blend in. So maybe he has no, because when he was being chased by his dad in the first episode, he didn't shift at all. But because Pixie still has his look of being part pig, he doesn't have that glamour ability. I don't know whether Wei Chen found that on his own or what. How is it that he's hidden what he is, but Pixie didn't. He kind of stayed exactly in his form underneath that hat. It's got to be. It's an intentional choice whether or not to do it or not, because Wei Chen's dad super was in his monkey form, his regular form when he came here. So it is kind of some specific. I mean, because even Guan Yin was just kind of dressed as a regular old person when she showed it's when she revealed, we never actually went back to that other world. We're still in this world. I just wanted to kind of get your decision on what choice you were going to make in this regard. So I'm still confused. I have to look into it a little bit more. My back and forth last episode about Wei Chen's dad. His dad's not the Jade. Maybe his dad is the Jade Emperor. Like I said, I don't know whether it's because the staff of his dad, but the staff is supposed to go to the Jade Emperor, not unless the Jade Emperor gave it to his dad. That's why I'm kind of confused, because they don't always fully equate his dad and the Jade Emperor in the same conversation. So maybe that's going. I'm watching these one at a time, so that's why I'm still confused on. I'm assuming it's supposed to mean his dad's the Jade Emperor, but I'm still so flippant and flip-floppy on whether that's the case or not. But either way, it's been a week since everything went down last episode, so Jin is trying to make up with his friend. Was it is it his buddy Anji, I believe is the name. I'm mispronouncing that. But he ended up making up with him. I love that he's like, yeah, that Swamp Thing character design, I don't like it. He's like, seriously, bro? The last one was like way he looked like prior to this particular artist took over looked like garbage. And he's like, oh, you bastards. Like, yeah, I knew that would get your attention, but luckily they made up. Because it's like, hey man, I miss hanging out with you, reading missing hanging out, talking about comics. And even though you completely disagree with everything I ever said, it's like, yeah, it's pretty easy when you're wrong about everything. So I do appreciate that Olive Branch was kind of restored in this regard. And it's like, right, Jin's trying to deal with the aftermath of the video, and it's like, well, for him, it's like, I love the whole back and forth of like, right, do you want it to be a Baby Yoda situation, or do you want it to be a Vin Diesel song situation? One has a much larger lifespan. I mean, to be fair, it's also in a day and age where memes die. But you're also living in a bubble of high school where like stuff like that stays forever. But it's like typically like memes on the internet die pretty quickly because a lot of that kind of gets run into the ground. So, but now Jin isn't going to be easily forgotten because he has someone like Susie, who's a part of the Culture Club, trying to get justice. It's like justice for just us, So Jin's kind of the poster boy for this, and he doesn't like that. And Wei Chen, trying to be a friend, tries to help out, especially because Susie convinced him to help out, that he ended up exposing that Greg's the one who took the video. So now Greg is like, yo, bro, oh, you're such a good player. I could talk to the coach for you. But I mean, hey, while I'm talking to the coach for you, why don't you talk to the principal? Tell her, hey, I'm a pretty good guy. It's like, you present. But that's the thing, like, Jin can tell what's up, but he doesn't want to, he's just like, yeah, like you've always been like, from what I've seen of you, Greg, you've always said, it's like, yeah, it's just, I'm not going to take too much of offense to it, but it's like, yeah, it bothered you because he just doesn't want to, I mean, that's why you went after Travis the way you did. And even Greg being like, yo, I just said that to make the other people laugh. It's like, yeah, but the fact is to like get a laugh out of someone, you have to put someone else down. That's never a good, It's like, oh, we find other ways to be funny without having to tear someone else down in the process, But even Greg saying the thing of, oh, you should hear the way they talk about the other stuff they say is like way worse, which I'm like, yeah, it kind of sounds like you're all dicks. I mean, we already knew Travis was a dick because he was the one that was like, oh, is something wrong? Like, he leaned into it. Like, the others kind of laughed about it, which makes him culpable as well. But it's like, yeah, so... like I said, it just makes Greg even scummier because it's like, hey, you present yourself as a good guy, but you did something like that. Maybe it is a thing of, hey, you didn't think much of it. You're like, hey, I tried to like crack this like joke. It's like you're like the captain or whatever, and it seems like everyone's pretty tight with you regardless. It doesn't seem like you really need like to get a laugh out of everybody. Like you need them to like you or whatever. Like Jen is trying to make it so that he doesn't want to stand out. He wants to just kind of be accepted. He wants to have like a normal life, but he tries to get in good with the coach and says like, hey, let me like help you with these weights and stuff. Let me help you clean up like the workout room. That turns so disastrously terrible because Wei Chen's attempt to get close to him backfired on multiple fronts. First with the Culture Club thing, then also the weight room situation because that blew up severely in his face. That got destroyed. Luckily, the fire extinguisher was in the wrong place. How comically that all like fell apart. That's like some like cartoon level disaster of just like the domino effect of destruction. But the fact is, it's like, yeah, it actually works out for us because the people who set it up are culpable. So now we actually do get like better equipment. So it all worked out in the end, luckily for you. But also, Jen ended up like speaking up for Greg in front of everybody, which obviously Susie was so disappointed in that because it's like, right, we are rallying behind you. And it is that thing of like, Jin didn't ask for this. You did kind of push Wei Chen because he thought like, hey, I'm his friend and I want to help out my friend. So you kind of pushed him to kind of put Jin as a poster child, even though like, it's the thing of like, right, if someone doesn't want to speak up, you shouldn't kind of force their hand. But it is also from Susie's perspective of there's so many people without a voice that we have to speak up for them. She's like, right, I don't agree with what you did, but I appreciate your honesty about, it's like, right, you just want to be a regular kid and just have a regular school life. Because he wants this all behind him because the more it stays in the zeitgeist, the more he has to kind of live with it. So he paints Greg as a nice guy, but it's like, eventually I think he's going to come to regret that decision because I think he's going to find out, hey, once again, it's like just with his buddy when he learned like, hey, these people you're trying to impress, they're not good people, you know. And this is something just like kind of on the comic book front, but you know, TV adaptations and stuff, where it's like the boys, like the line that Annie Starlight says to A-Train, why do you want to be accepted by people who don't like you? Like, these people have already kind of proven themselves to be dicks. Like, but you're just like, oh, like, yeah, they're the cool crowd. I want to hang out with them because it makes me less awkward. But it's like, yeah, like, if they can't accept you for you, if you can't really be you around them, then it's, you shouldn't have to conform to be like other people. Once again, it's just, I think it's a larger conversation where Jin feels the need, being like, once again, kind of the oddball Asian kid, but also like just the oddball nerd in school in general. He wanted this year to be different, so that's why he's kind of going above and beyond in this regard. But I think eventually he will learn and kind of see like the ugliness behind it, where like, oh, Greg isn't the great person you thought he was, or maybe Greg will have a redemption arc, but maybe like Travis and the others will be total douchebags. Like Travis and his crew that are like Jin's quote unquote friends, they're probably going to be more of an issue, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Another element to this episode is Jin's dad. I think it's so interesting. I think his buddy's name is Patrick, who most recently obviously saw as Jin's son on Barry. He's actually, I guess, one of Simon's friends at work, trying to hook him up of like, yo, you want more FaceTime with the boss? We could go. And there's like one of their like coworkers like schmoozing it up with him, and Simon can't really find an opening. He tried to be like, hey, I watch in the NFL. It's like, oh, so how's your fantasy going? And he's like, what? It's like fantasy football. Like his buddy's trying to give him a layup, but it doesn't work. I know I'm mixing sports there. I'm not the sports guy. It's like, but obviously like, layup in the metaphor, in the anecdotal example of like basketball. Like I said, I am aware enough to know like, hey, I am mixing up like obviously that's them. Well, I'm sure it's the same thing I'm sure there's like fantasy drafts in like basketball too. I mainly hear about football. I never really hear it about basketball, but I'm sure it exists probably in like every sport, like even baseball, but I'm not the sports dude. That's not my lane of nerd. I know there are a lot of people that's their lane of nerd. I've never really gravitated towards sports. The only sports I've ever gravitated towards is like sports in the form of anime, where it's like an Ice Shield 21 or Prince of Tennis type of situation, or Air Gear. But either way, tangents and all that aside, it just didn't seem to work out for Simon, but then he's listening to Bon Jovi, and his boss, like John, really connects with that because they both love Bon Jovi. And it's like, it's that thing of Simon had no idea that him and his boss had such commonality. And it's like, yeah, his boss has gone to seen Bon Jovi before, but, Simon's never had the opportunity because, like, yeah, where I'm from is that was never an easy opportunity. It's probably like a combination of the money you would need and just, he's always probably been a person of like, it's probably always been a thing of, especially with his parents, probably, I mean, who knows? But you would assume in like, it's just kind of like no, focus on your studies, worry about all that frivolous stuff, who cares? But it also, it's probably pretty expensive even back then, but either way, and Simon wants to talk to his boss about getting a promotion, but the problem is John is retiring next month. So it's like, yeah, like I'm sure he could push that through, but I'm sure like in a work culture type of thing, that's probably like a no-no of like, well, I'm about to retire. Are you going to ask me a favor? Like that's probably a no-no. But also anything that he pushes through, that's like, something I've recently learned about of like how in the work environment of like, yeah, when the new boss comes in, they're going to be the ones kind of like thinning out the herd because they're like, oh, this person did all this stuff. I'm coming in to flip the script on everything because anything that my predecessor set up, I don't get to take credit for. So I'm bringing in stuff that's wholly mine to take credit for. So if Jin was put in that, if Simon was put in a position where like, hey, I could, end up in a better like position and stuff, promotion, it's like maybe that month time period it could go through, but in the transitional period with someone filling that void, it could be an issue. But he ends up talking to his wife about it, but it's like, yeah, it's too late. But she's like, no, that means there's an open position taken. And he's like, me as a boss, I never thought about it like that. She's like, of course you never did, but you should. You are qualified. You've been working here for 10 years. You could be the one to run the division. But I think we don't know what it is. Because like I said, my last episode was maybe it's because, once again, we don't really know like what maybe it's just like very much like Jin of like, hey, I'm like one of the few Asian Asian kids here. I don't want to stand out, just like his dad. Like, I mean, they even had the parallel of like, yeah, when his mom was talking to Jin about, hey, you should kind of speak up, which obviously is funny considering that's what this episode was about, speaking up. And he did speak up, just not in a way other people probably would have been the better way to speak up. But either way, it's like his dad's looking because he can tell like it's not just meant for Jin, it's meant to be for him. And then like we see them both kind of eating like the food at the same time in the same way. It's like I brought it up last episode, the parallels between them. Like Jin's a lot like his dad in that regard. But so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front with Simon. Like I said, I don't know if it is just a thing of like, hey, I'm the Asian guy at work and I don't want to like, in the regards of like, hey, I'm like one of the only minorities at this place, I don't want to really rock the boat, or whether there's something deeper there. I mean, it might just be like his upbringing that makes him go like, yeah, like, because like I said, his wife said like, hey, you were brave before, but I don't know where all that went. I'm wondering what changed in that regard. Maybe it's just like the world changed and maybe Simon hasn't quite adapted to it, and so he's just very like, oh, something triggered and just happened that made him go like, hey, I'm gonna just stay quiet, just kind of do my thing. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see to find out like what is the extra context behind that. But then we also have the Pixie situation where him and Wei Chin duke it out. Obviously, Jin only saw part of it before he ended up kind of getting a little knocked out. But it's like, yeah, kind of hard to like deal with Wei Chin, because I noticed we only had like a couple minutes left in the episode. I was like, are we really about to have a full action sequence? But it's like, it's a little bit of an action sequence, but it's like, yeah, you're easily distracting him with food. So yeah, he's not fighting you at your A game. I mean, it's like, oh, if my dad couldn't bring me back, you couldn't. Even though I was like, well, your dad kind of like, it was pretty, you were handling your own to some extent, but your dad definitely outclasses you. But I'm like, yeah, I get it. If like your dad couldn't bring you back as skilled as he is, even though he could have if Guan Yin hadn't stepped in. But it's like, yeah, someone else like you. But I guess his dad's just going to be sending everyone to come after him in different shapes and forms. It's like they're probably going to pop up, you know, because I was wondering if that, because we're dealing with a bull demon, so that's why I didn't know if this guy was a good guy or a bad guy. But it seems like, yeah, he works for Wei Chin's dad, which I think is so interesting. I mean, it's only the second episode out of 8. I also don't know. From what I was seeing, I haven't looked into it. I usually wait till the end of the season to look into it. But I'm assuming this is just a one-off, because the comic book is based off of, it's only like 240 pages, I think. Well, it's based on a graphic novel. So I'd assume it's not like very lengthy in that regard. So it's probably going to be a one-and-done type of thing. Maybe not. I'll probably get more clarity on that by the end of the season, whether or not there's room for more story. Might still be, but it might have told the whole story of the graphic novel. Either way, tangents and all that. But it is only episode 2 of like 8, so there's still 6 more. But I was wondering, like, wow, interesting. Like, we've heard talks about the bull demon, but we haven't seen any of the bad guys. It's just kind of like the quote unquote good guys so far. So I think that's so fascinating. So I'm really interested to see kind of where all this ends up taking us in that regard. I should also bring this up too. I almost let it slip my mind before I finish up here. I love the whole, like, you know, Amelia talking to Jin. It's like, oh yeah, what'd you do? He's like, I did stuff. Like, yeah, my dad was going to teach me how to drive, but he didn't. So I guess I shouldn't have said yes. I don't know why I said yes. And it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. And then like, I'm like, sorry about that video going out, because she blamed herself, thinking like, hey, it's me. If I hadn't distracted you with like, oh, like just like when you wanted to hang out and I didn't, maybe I distracted you. He's like, no, you never have to apologize for anything, which is almost like, oh, that's sweet. Which, speaking of him, like, and Amelia, it does seem like his buddy, like I said, I think it's Anji. I could be misremembering, but I believe his buddy has a thing for Susie. It just seemed like he was just like, it's like, oh, this is crazy, and he's like, crazy beautiful. I'm like, yeah, I don't think it was just about the message. I think he has a thing for Susie. So we'll probably dive into that more. But either way, I love Amelia's friend Ruby being like, yeah, that was super uncool, like, you know, the whole meme and everything. Because she's like, BTS is my favorite band, like, ever. And I love Amelia being like, Ruby, hush. He's like, yeah. She's like, what? It's true. It's like, especially, it's like, understandable. Like, even I like can admit, yo, BTS puts out some bangers, dude. But it's just kind of like a thing of, I get the commonality of like, oh yeah, like that's super messed up. I mean, like, let you know, like there's, it's that funny thing of like, it's almost like if someone, like the parallel I'd look at it, it's like the same equivalent of someone, it's like, oh yeah, like I love black, it's almost like the thing of like, oh yeah, I love black people. It's like, yeah, Drake's my favorite artist. It's like that. It's kind of got that same energy. That's why Amelia was like, stop it. She's like, but it wasn't that thing of it was meant any harm. It was a little like lighthearted in that capacity. But I think it also feeds into like this story of just kind of like the awkwardness of people, like some people not realizing how messed up the whole thing is, and other people kind of taking it for granted and stuff like that. Jin kind of is, it's bothering him, but he doesn't want, it's like, hey, I want to be the guy that just kind of smiles and accepts it, because I don't want to make it a bigger deal, because I don't want to draw more attention on myself. But also like, hey, I maybe believe that Greg's not that bad of a guy, so I'm willing to give him a chance, especially because it benefits me. So like I said, it's just a lot of interesting elements that I'm curious to see how it all plays out going forward. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.